So as the mood or mode of the day, I won't present the paper, so rather read out the paper, rather I will try to make kind of summary of what I have written here about this. Transfiguring God, reaching Aporia, Dialectics of the secular, the religious, and the romantic. Now, from the morning to this time, it's already well established that our admiration, appraisal of British Romantic movement, British Romantic literature, especially Romantic poetry, and how Bangla literature is infinitely influenced and shaped and conditioned by the British Romantic tradition. But perhaps it is also time to demystify this, to problematize this, and to show that the way we respond to British Romantic tradition is not free from the other things like, say, power relation, politics, ideological issues, things like that. Especially the way we respond to Romantic poetry seems to be free from two different things. One is that the question of religion, and the other question, the question of politics. But Romantic movement, Romantic tradition, Romantic literature, especially the Romantic poets, and their writings cannot be appreciated, cannot be understood properly if we actually fail to respond to the political issues or the religious issues they were caught in their times. The Romantic literature can be considered as something that is a result of all these things. So the conditions of possibilities, Enlightenment, Industrial Revolution, French Revolution, emergence of the bourgeoisie, and then. But usually we ignore this list also. That without this, the Romantic period of the Romantic literature could not happen. That non-conformist religion, reform movement, politics, evangelicalism, and as a result of all these things, Christian socialism, or you can say the emergence of political religion. Okay, so this is very important to understand them. And of course, the condition of possibilities was, made by this, holy or unholy marriage between these three: capital, religion, and technology. Okay. And if we can make kind of summary of this as synthesis of you can say possibilities. The first one is that religious or theological aesthetic, and then subversive or progressive, 𝗧𝗿𝗪𝗂𝗧 or sub-antithesis, things like that, and Christian Romantic dialectic. That means the Romantic poets, the Romantic literature in general, were deeply religious. Okay, we shouldn't forget this. Okay, and we respond, especially in our tradition, from the second half of 19th century, even up to this moment, for the more than 100 years, the way we respond to these things is also betrays or reveals what we are. But we usually try to hide that, or we try to discuss Romantic literature, or the way we respond to Romantic literature in a way which seems to be, to a certain extent, more or less secular in nature. It doesn't work. Because essentially what the Romantics they wanted to do is this, and this is nothing but a kind of religious slogan, the greatest good and the truest God. So this is a kind of combination, and later on we also find the same kind of combination in the Muslim world. The greatest good and the truest God for the greatest number, And this is what I actually mentioned as the reaching aporia, that is, secular religiosity or religious secularity. And the way in our Indian subcontinent we have practiced secularity or secularism as such is nothing but actually this brand. Even 𝗧𝗿𝗵𝗂𝗂𝗃 in one of her essays talked about this, and she talked about this that secularism is actually the other name of Christianity, and that's why secularism failed in countries like Bangladesh or India or in this kind of context. Now, my main argument will be based on this one, Robert M. Ryan's triangulation of this thing. And in the book, I will be basing my arguments is The Romantic Reformation, Religious Politics in English Literature. It was published by Cambridge University Press, 2004. Politics, literature, and religion. That means literature, especially romantic literature, romantic poetry, cannot be separated from the politics and the religion of its time. It doesn't work. So fine. So just I can read one or two paragraphs from the writer that I have. Yes, it's fine. So the dominant presupposition of literary criticism last few decades in our context have been secular. This doesn't mean that something extrinsic that shackled our practice has been lifted so that it has become neutral or without presuppositions, but that it presupposes a view of the world opposed to the religious. It has been undoubtedly dominated by a range of theoretical movements which are clandestinely united in the silent refusal of the possibility of faith that precedes their diverse practices. As a result of that, our understanding of romantic poetry and poetry in general is fundamentally vitiated by the stance of the secular and the tendency to present and represent poetry as secular forms of art. As a result of this inaugural refusal, which means that interpretation, in a sense, begins before it has begun, the religion has become the repressed other. Okay, so we are talking about the other, especially Professor 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃 talked about that, and Professor Sen also talked about this, that integrating the other with the self and things like that. So in that way we become universal. But the way we actually receive romantic literature is actually rather making what was an intrinsic part of romantic movement, romantic literature, as segregating it, as separating it as the other, and that is the presence of the religion or religious values. So one of the reasons of such tendency is perhaps the non-conformist positions the Romantics held. Actually, we get confused because that all the Romantics were more or less rebels. They had rebellious stances, but they are none of them was against religion. Rather, they were against the established, institutionalized form of religion that was there dominating in the society. So one of the reasons of such tendencies, perhaps the non-conformist positions the Romantics held, William Blake, William Wordsworth, Lord Byron, John Keats, and the Shelleys, according to Ryan's strong reading in that book, enter the world of renegade religious stances. William Hazlitt, Charles Lamb, and Coleridge, one of England's greatest poets, according to me, were committed to the cause of Unitarianism. And I think all of us know what Unitarianism, that they refused to accept the Trinity. They actually considered Christ not as God the Son, rather inspired by God, but a human being. Okay, so it's so radical in nature from the traditional Christian faith. So the ultimate religious heresy of the time, this was considered as the ultimate religious heresy of the time. That means they were not only religious, they were rather intensely engaged in religious controversies. William Blake is a prime case of that. And these religious controversies were inseparably related to their political values. In a way, by revolting against the neoclassical spirit of rationality and logic, and reintroducing the mystery in the totality of human understanding, they revived religious vibes and used their religiosity to serve their political purposes. That's why Robert Ryan's triangulation of religion, politics, and literature during the British Romanticism's historical milieu is so significant. And this triangulation reveals the process of transfiguration of Christian concept of God in the last decades of 18th century, and the emergence of a peculiar kind of religiosity, which shaped and conditioned the psyche and the poetic practices of the Romantics. With the Industrial Revolution and the consequent emergence of the capital, the Romantics discovered themselves in a brave new world of religious transfiguration made possible by non-conformist religion, reform movement politics, and transforming imagination, and entered into the politically subversive or sub-antithetical stance of the Christian Romantic dialectic. What emerged out of this dialectics may be termed as Christian socialism or political religion, as I have shown in the slide. All these seek both the greatest good and the truest God for the greatest number. Thus, like the early German Romantics, they made the spheres of the religious and the theological, the aesthetic and the philosophical inseparable, since they were in fact mutually reinforcing and essentially dialectical in nature. And this dialectic is essentially the relationship between the infinite and the finite. But this infinite is a bit radical in nature. It is an intuition or vision of the infinite within the finite, or a kind of identity that unites the two contradictory realms. From Blake's fearful symmetry through 𝗧𝗿𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 project of the supernatural in the natural and the natural in the supernatural, Byron's I doubt if doubt itself be doubting, or sorrow is knowledge, or things like that, Shelley's search for the immanent presence of the divine, or to Keats' declaration of the truth, beauty, synonymity of the Godhead. Everywhere we find the intuitive understanding of the presence of the transcendence in the immanence. Everywhere we find the tendency to discover the divine in the mundane. The politics of being declassed by accepting the deep religious dictates of equality and justice, by affording the impossible dream of the heaven on earth. That's why Blake is the most heretic and at the same time most fanatically religious among all poets. Wordsworth is a total confusion of radical social change and conservative religious dogma. Coleridge is a gradual development from a strong supporter of Unitarianism to Trinitian, or you can say Trinitian Anglicanism, and so on. But the results of these confusions, contradictions, paradoxes, and dialectical coexistence are many. They laid the grounds for the statutory acceptance of Catholic Jews, and so the results are many. One of the results is this, that it actually brought in, or it gave birth to tolerance, religious diversities and tolerance, things like that. That's why perhaps we misunderstand these Romantic people as something that as if they are not religious, rather they are against religion. This is one of the things. Okay, and the other thing is that this growth of tolerance, or the acceptance of the dissenters in the society, and the laws for toleration of religious antagonisms during expanding capitalist industrialism, which, like all productive systems, was impossible. It was a necessity. Why? This tolerance, or this opening up and all these things, because without which this kind of capitalist industrialism, or this kind of growth, changes in the society would not have been possible. But this gradually accepted toleration was far from spiritual indifference. The invisible hand of the market still traced the mysterious ways of God. Capitalism incorporated, as it does today, many spiritual strains. One example of which is defined by Max Weber in the Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. The most interesting development is of a faceless supernatural authority. That means it's a kind of fusion of God and capital together. Okay. And that's why I'm saying this is a faceless supernatural authority. Faceless because it is a superfusion of the Protestant divinity with the capitalist work ethics of market forces, an authority which was vital to prosperity and the individuals of all religious tribes equally and simultaneously bow to its dim shadow. Thus, Catholicism, Judaism, and descending Protestantism were all eventually drawn into the apparatus of state, economy, and culture. And ironically, but superbly dialectically, Romantic revolt contributed to the Romantic modernism, and high modernism, which were unrecognized children of the capitalist imperialism of the last 2 centuries. This is very important for us to understand because the class or the people of our country or of this subcontinent who actually appreciate, study, analyze, even make our profession out of our study of this Romantic literature, Romantic poetry, we perhaps feel this deep affinity with them. But for a long time, we ignored this. And as a result of that, perhaps the symptoms are coming up in the whole Indian subcontinent. Okay, we have ignored this for decades. And, 4 minutes. Okay. 4 minutes?
No, sir. Okay.
Oh, it's okay. No, I have finished. And that's why I think that we should now, the time has come to reevaluate our understanding of Romantic poetry, Romantic literature in particular, but our whole study of English literature in general. We should change, or rather, we should actually incorporate or reincorporate the presence of religion in our study of English literature. Religion that supported, a particular mode of financial economic system, which is called capitalism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mamun.